Hey everybody, welcome back to the Rochester Real Estate Show. Joined today by regular guest Peter Riccardi, Anthony
Hello,
Butera
everybody.
Team, Jason Mancuso here.
Hello, everybody.
Wanted to address a topic, address a newer topic, I guess, and just like getting a lot of questions from people that are entering the market new that haven't been, in the last 5 years, which is most homeowners stay in a home 5 to 7 years on average.
Sure.
On a shorter on 5 years, really, on average. And this is a new topic that's come across. Escalation clauses.
Sure.
So like working with people that haven't been in the market in the last 5 years and haven't, been tuned into it because why do you need to be type of thing. Explaining this concept and it's like, wait, what? Right. So figured take the opportunity to just do a quick show on escalation clauses relative to, this market that we're in and tackle that.
Sure. Yeah.
Why don't
Where
we
should we start?
with like Peter, just define an escalation clause, how you think of it, how you would define it.
Sure. So to kind of start from the beginning, when you're making an offer on a house, most of the time you don't know what other buyers are offering. And a lot of times buyers ask me like, what should we offer? Like, do you know what other offers are going to be? And a lot of times we don't. Sometimes a lot of times we can get, information on how many offers they have. Very rarely can we get amounts and stuff. And that's kind of where escalation clauses came into play. You know, so an escalation clause pretty much says this. You put a starting number in your contract on a number you want to start at. You put in there a number you want to beat the next offer by, and then you put a cap as far as a number you don't want to go past. So what that does is it's a good tool for buyers because it allows you to not completely blow out the next offer. Like say you couldn't do escalation clauses.
Right.
You wrote an offer 100 grand above asking price. The next competing offer was 20 grand above asking price. You just could have overpaid 80,000 more.
I mean, you really did.
Yeah, then
Right.
you had
But
to.
it's market value dictated by what a buyer is willing to pay for something.
Exactly.
If you're the buyer who's overshooting that by 80 grand to get it,
Sure.
you
Yeah,
overpaid.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. So I mean, ultimately, it's a protection for the buyer,
Sure.
right? With that said, because versus going in blind and throwing out big numbers because the market's competitive and there's multiple offers and this is going to go crazy type of thing, and just shooting your shot in a
Sure.
big way and you win, and then whether you find out or not, but it's just it eliminates the what if, right? Like in terms of what you're competing against and what you're beating.
Exactly.
Versus just okay, yeah, I won the bid. I've got this house, but what if I paid too much? What if the next offer below me was 80 grand less in that
Exactly.
extreme scenario?
Yeah.
Before we dive in any further, I think I'll give like some historical context. It was 2018 ish, around 2018. This concept really got introduced to the market. And it's not like some sort of scientific like discovery or anything, right? I mean, it's just kind of, I don't know how it like what market, what city or whatever, what realtor, was the first one to use it.
Yeah. I wonder that too.
I'd be curious,
Yeah,
right?
me too.
But ultimately, like 2018, the sellers market really starting to take off locally here in Rochester, nationally as well, and just multiple offer situations, homes selling quickly, buyers wanting to compete and get the house that they want. And then all of a sudden this comes onto the scene of like, okay, the market essentially figured out very quickly that it's like, okay, let's figure out how to protect our buyers, but still make them competitive.
Sure.
In this concept of a buyer saying, hey, I'm going to beat your next highest offer by $1,000, for example, up to a capped amount,
Sure.
like you said. it's a good thing for a seller because the seller's just like, you know, they're just piling on, right? Like, you know, okay, yeah, you're in the lead. Somebody else comes in, they're above that one, you're in the lead.
Yep.
Like, okay, let's get the highest we can as a seller, and for buyers, you know, giving yourself the ability to be competitive while still staying within the comfort zone
Of
of
course, yep.
what the most you'd be willing to pay for is.
Well, that's the helpful part for buyers. You literally can put your best foot forward without a ton of worries, you know, like you could put your top number in there and
Yeah,
kind of see how things play out with the other offers.
I think, you know, one of the unintended consequences of this is there's been plenty of deals or plenty of buyers, plenty of agents, whatever, to where like, let's see where this ends up and then I'll decide if I get it.
It does happen.
And
Yeah.
that's unfortunate. So don't be that buyer, don't be that agent. That essentially like, oh, I didn't think it was gonna go that high.
Yeah.
And I'm not interested in this. Just want to get your attention.
Yeah.
I wanted you to come back to me, Mr. Seller, and you know, tell me what number it was gonna be at, and then I can decide.
Yeah. I mean, I get it, but
Right.
you know, put offers in good faith. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
I get it. People can change your mind, and it does happen.
Sure.
You know, if you get
Absolutely.
uncomfortable, cold feet, it does happen, but put it in good faith.
There's a lot, yeah, and there's not a lot, but it's been something that grows because you know, you mentioned having a cap. I know it's a term with the kids, but no cap.
Yeah,
Has been
yeah.
something that we've seen too.
Yeah.
I've never had, so I've seen this on listings, I don't know, maybe a dozen times.
Yeah.
And I've never had one of those buyers actually hold true to what the number is, meaning that like, okay, let's just give an example. My initial offer is $200,000. I'm gonna beat the next highest offer by $1,000. There's no cap to it.
Seller write the cap,
Yeah,
come
you
back,
tell me-
put in the number, we'll sign
You
it.
tell
Pretty
me
much.
what number we're at, pretty
Yep.
much. And then it comes back to that buyer. It's like, okay, well, yeah, clear, yeah, you're gonna be in the lead because you're agreeing to beat the next highest offer,
Any offer.
no matter
Yep.
what it is, by $1,000.
Yep.
And then they find out it's like, you know, whatever extreme example, it's like, well, you're gonna be at 297, and yeah. God, yeah.
Way too high. Yeah.
I was expecting more like 250, so good for you on that one. Right, so that's a dynamic that happens.
Yeah.
Went off on a tangent there, obviously, that's something we want to.
Well, it's relevant though. It's relevant and it does happen. I mean, I haven't seen it a ton, or maybe at all yet. But I have heard of it and it does happen.
Seen them and as a listing agent, my first move then is once I get everything organized, right? Because there's a lot of these situations where it's like you have 10 offers, 30 offers, whatever, even 5 offers. There's a lot to organize to make sure you're doing your job for your seller.
Of course, a lot to
right?
go through. Yeah.
So you go through everything and it's like, okay, here's this buyer with no cap. So my first call is to them and letting the agent know, like, okay, here's where you're gonna be.
Yeah.
Like, let me know. And then in my experience anyway, every one of them has been like, yeah, I'm sorry,
Too high.
I'm a jerk, it's too high. Okay, no problem. That's why I called you first. No worries. Get out of our way.
Yeah.
Right? Relevant, like you said.
Of course. And the same thing happens just like that when they write high escalation clauses. You know, a lot of times we got to call them back, be like, hey, this is where it's landing. Can you call your people,
Yep.
make sure that they're comfortable with that number?
Exactly.
You
That's
know?
exactly the strategy because, you know, what we just talked about, but also just making sure that you know, before you go as a listing agent, call all the other offers that are losing. You know, you're the one that you want to work with and that you feel is the solid choice for the seller, that they're also like, as much as you can predict or as much as you can control, not going to be left with cold feet.
You have to make sure it's solid, especially before getting back to everyone. And they'd probably want us to do that too, because if that one, you know, falls through, you want us to move down the line and pick another one. Last thing you want is to call them and tell them they didn't get it. And then you got to call them back again and be like, hey, well, listen, it fell through. You guys still,
Right.
You know?
Exactly. So we'll run through an example. I touched on it a little bit, but like, okay, let's just, and really all it takes is 2 offers. So let's just use the example, house listed at 200,000. Let's say offer 1, just comes right out and offers 230. No escalation, their offers 230. It's only 2 offers. Offer 2 has an escalation clause and they're at $200,000 to start. And then they're saying, I'm gonna beat the next highest offer by $2,000. And I'll go up to 240.
Yep.
Buyer number two would then be at 232, right? It said 230 was buyer
Yep.
number one. So they would then be at 232. And then you're, as you mentioned, presenting that to buyer two, like, hey, you're gonna win if you're at 232. That's how this is gonna play out. I'm gonna show you, and this is a requirement. I'm gonna show you proof of the offer at 230. So that
Yep.
you know, as the buyer, I'm not just playing you, right? And that becomes part of the contract and part of, what is looked at and ultimately signed off on. And then buyer number two has it at 232. Now, further gamesmanship involved potentially, but that's how it plays out. And buyers protected to where they didn't just go up to 240. They didn't need to. And they all, they're winning, they won. Sellers happy because they got the most amount of money they could.
Sure.
You may say opens the door for the seller to go back to buyer two and be like, well, you told me you're willing to go up to 240.
Well, that's also relevant because that does happen as well. I mean, and that's a risk. We get asked from buyers like, hey, they're going to see our top number in there. Are they going to come back and want that even though they don't have other offers? And my response is they could.
Right.
And it does happen sometimes and you don't have to, it's completely up to you,
Yeah.
but it could, and I've seen it happen. So that there is a risk there. But for the most part, I've seen people move forward in good faith and use escalation clauses
I think
the way they're intended.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was just gonna say. The way that it's intended is the way that it plays out majority of the time. Right?
Sure.
We're kind of talking about, almost horror story type examples within this topic, right? But like, yeah, most people operate to where, you keep using that term good faith, which I love. Most people operate that way and like, yeah, thanks for putting your best foot forward. You were the determination of market value for this house.
Sure.
We've just, laid it out that's 232 in that example.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this, Jason. You have a buyer that knows that their cap, maybe we can use that example,
Okay.
knows their cap is 250 and they're just like, Pete, listen, Jason, I want to do whatever it takes. I don't care if I blow out the next offer. I want this house. Is writing a flat out offer up to 250 stronger than an escalation clause, say 200 to 250? What are your thoughts?
Great question. And for the purpose of how you worded that question in terms of, is that offer going to be stronger? I'll say yes.
Of course.
Right? Because let's just stick on that scenario where say it's still two offers, buyer one is at 230 and you just come in at 250. Of course, the seller's going to be happy with 20 grand more, right? And of course, you're likely to win. So it comes down to like, what's the best choice for you as the buyer? And this is where we come in as your fiduciary, part of which is to negotiate you the best deal possible and advise you of like, listen, like if you're telling me you got to have it and you're willing to overpay, like literally overpay, I shouldn't even be in air quotes I'm doing right now. Like you're just overpaying by 20 grand.
Yeah.
Based on what, market value is deemed by the demand side of the equation. So if you need this house that bad, you want it, you're willing to do that. Listen, I support you, but I'm going to do my job and hold my responsibility to you to let you know of the risk of doing that. Now, another response, or, that could lead down the path of, revised strategy, so to speak, to where it's, okay, that's great. You want this house. First of all, before all this, it's like, I'm talking to the listing agent. I'm getting a feel.
Getting all the information.
Yeah,
how many interests, how many offers.
Telling them what our approach is, without showing too much, right? But like, just like letting them know how bad this buyer wants it, letting them know how well qualified they are, trying to find out what terms, that are, if there's anything out of the ordinary the seller wants, what we can do to accommodate the seller. Like, it's basically, hey, whatever the seller wants, we'll do
Literally,
as long
yeah.
as, we're in agreement with it. So you tell us type of thing, trying to get a feel for, how things are going, where they could land. I mean, ethically speaking, there's this dance, so to speak, of, as a listing agent, like you can't just go out and be like, hey, you got to beat 247 in order to get it. But there's gamesmanship to both protect, your license, your clients, and also maximize the situation that plays out. So after all that rambling, what I would say is like, okay, you want this house. What if we did this? What if we made an aggressive escalation factor is the term, to where it's like, I'm gonna beat the next highest offer by 5 grand, 10
50,
grand,
20, whatever.
like you tell me how bad you're willing to, beat the next highest offer by. And now you're probably at more peace with like, okay, I didn't overpay. I did
Or at
what I
least
didn't
as
need to get.
much
Yeah,
as I would
right,
have.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Because this way now like there's transparency, it's disclosed, okay, I'm beating the next highest offer by 5 grand. I'm at 235. They were at 230. I can live with that. And you're saying you can live with beating the next highest offer by 5 grand in that example right from the start. So you're good with it.
sure.
And that's how it's evolved too over the years. Like it used to be, like when it started, it was, very small increments, like hundreds of dollars,
Oh,
like
geez.
$500. Then it evolved to 1,000. And now we're at this point to where it's like, especially with buyers that may not be as strong, right? Like say if it's a offer situation where there's, there's 20 offers or something, and you're an FHA buyer with a low down payment, and know that you're going to be going against cash and conventional mortgages, or cash and then conventional mortgage. That may definitely be the advice. Like you got to make yourself stand up.
Yep.
You got to give them a reason to go with your offer over something that may be deemed as less risky. And yeah, show me the money is what the seller's going to say if you want to get my attention.
Sure.
So that's how it's evolved in this market, to where it's like, okay, yeah, like you're gonna have to bump that up. And if you're looking at that as overpaying, I get it, but this is most likely your path to getting it. Because if I'm this, I would relate to that buyer, to where like me as a listing agent, I'm telling my seller, it's great that this weaker buyer on paper, maybe it's just not even finding, maybe it's deposit amount, right?
Down payment, whatever it may
Whatever,
be.
yeah, like, okay, if you're weaker than say just the strongest buyer you could be in terms of cash and high deposit and no contingencies, all of
Yep.
that. If you have something that makes you weaker in comparison, it's likely not going to be enough that just $1,000
No.
gets their attention.
Mm-mm.
Because I'm advising as a listing agent to the seller, like, is taking on this additional risk worth $1,000 more?
Yeah.
And 9.9 out of 10 times, every seller is going to say, yeah, no, just give
Not
me
worth
this.
it.
Like, I'm happy. These are crazy numbers that we're looking at already. Just give me the safe play and I'll take $1,000 less. I'm okay with that.
Sure.
When it's 10 grand, now they got something
Talk a
to
little
think
bit.
about.
Exactly.
And those are the conversations that are fun and difficult on our end, because like, it's really like,
Roll the
that
dice.
is 10 grand.
I mean, is that worth
Well,
it?
are you gonna play or not?
Yeah,
Yeah, let me see what I can do to get that much more like confident that this buyer can and will perform. But
Yep.
these are the things you gotta think about.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you rarely see under 1,000 these days. I mean,
No.
even 1,000 is can be on the lower side.
It's literally evolved to where, yeah, 1,000 is like on the minimum side of things.
Sure. Absolutely.
And a low, like non-competitive minimum.
Yeah.
And now that, yeah, we're seeing 5 is kind of a good.
Yeah, 2 to 5, I'd say,
Two,
is like
2, 3, like that every bit helps, right?
Of
But when
course.
if you were a buyer telling me like, hey, I need this house, don't blow it, do your thing, I'd be telling you, okay, we gotta, I want you to get it. I also don't want you to significantly overpay.
You also got to do what you got to do to get the house at the same
If
time.
you're
Yeah.
telling me like, I don't care, money's not a thing, like, I don't care if I beat the next highest offer by 50 grand. Okay. Maybe that's still an escalation. Maybe it is a decision that both you and the client have consulted on where it's like, ah, let's just throw our highest number on there.
Sure.
So it really depends. It
Absolutely.
really depends.
Yeah.
What else? What else on escalations did we not cover?
I mean, yeah, I mean, that, just to sum it up, I mean, that's kind of how the bidding in this market works and how
Yeah.
houses are getting bidded up is those escalation clauses kind of just feed off each other. And that's how, you know, for the most part.
To that point, you know, like how it can work, say there's 5 offers, right? Say every one of them has an escalation.
Yeah.
Say like first offer escalates up to 250. That's the first benchmark. Next offer escalates past that to 260. Now
That's
we're
the
at
benchmark.
260. Next offer escalates to 270. Now we're at 270. So on and so forth. Like, you know, you go off the escalation cap amount when there's multiple that keep driving the price up. So that's why it's like we've seen crazy situations where there's only been a few offers or 2 offers, and both of them have an escalation up to high numbers. And even though there's only 2 people dancing at the party, that seller's gonna make up.
Of course. Can we talk about the seller's side now on how important it is to get multiple offers in regards to those escalation clauses because it'll help bid up the price?
Great point.
You know, so let's talk about the other side there, because the more offers you get with more escalation clauses, essentially the more they can kind of feed off and the higher it may go.
So now we're in this conversation of pricing a listing, right?
Pretty much.
And when a listing is priced aggressively to have that result in this market, that's the result that sellers are accustomed to getting. And it makes a world of a difference, because when you price a listing, consumers not dumb, right? Like
They know the
they
market.
know things, they pick up on things quickly, or they're working with great agents that inform them quickly, right? So once a consumer knows how the game is played, and you recognize like, okay, for this example, this house is priced at 150, but it's not selling for 150. This thing's going over 200.
Everyone knows it's underpriced. You could just
Everybody
tell.
knows the game that's being played, and therefore that's what kicks this strategy into play as a commonality. Like, this is just how it works right now. It's essentially like, okay, how are these escalations gonna play out? Cause I priced it right, cause I got a lot of butts in the door for activity, showings, and through the open house and whatnot. And I've got a lot of offers to look at, and now we're in this driving the price up game.
Sure.
Versus pricing it not for that to play out, and the consumer saying like, all right, this doesn't seem like it's priced for a bidding war, and I don't want to give them a bidding war much on top of what they're asking because I don't feel it's worth it. Yeah, you're probably not going to get you may not get a multiple offer situation at all. And I mean, it would, don't get me wrong, crazier things have happened, but it would be unlikely that, you know, you're getting escalating numbers into crazy amounts on top of what is already a crazy list price.
Sure. Yeah.
This is the situations you hear about where listings don't sell. Right.
Of course.
Right.
Or going past the deadline,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
because buyers will keep an eye on it. They'll be like, well, listen, I know I already got to pay over asking price. Let me keep an eye on this one, see if
Right.
it doesn't sell, and then try and make a move on it.
Sure.
You know, and we do see that a lot of times houses go past the deadline and buyers find out about it and they still get multiple offers. Maybe not as much, but
And that's where it becomes so important to have an agent that knows the market, right? Because they tell you like, okay, in that example you just laid out, right? Like, this is not priced for a bidding war. And I've either spoken with the agent, checked on the activity. They're not getting, it doesn't seem like much is happening. This could be an opportunity. I know you don't want to go over asking price for it. This could be an opportunity where we get it with no competition. Maybe you can have an inspection contingency. Maybe you're not putting, you know, your first child up as a deposit in escrow as well, right? Stuff like that can, you know, help the buyer kind of feel good in a market where, other than getting settled into their home, they're not really feeling all that great, right?
sure.
So having an agent that knows that and can advise you, because you know what you mentioned of like, yeah, let's wait and see what happens. versus let's get in there and we may even be offering under asking price.
Sure. So on the buyer side then, should they take the approach, say a buyer's approved up to 220, which is a very common price point, and there's a lot of buyers in that price point. Should they take the approach of going for the houses that work for them listed at the 130 to 180 mark? Or should they try and look at similar type homes listed at closer to their little bit of both, mix it up? What's the
Well, because I think if you, again, if you have an agent who's fully tuned into the market and can advise you on each independent listing and how to play it, both are in play,
Sure.
right? Because if because here's where, it may take some time to learn that like, okay, this house priced at 220 and we can only go up to that is also priced to sell at 300. Your agent's going to be wanting to, selfishly protect their time, but also like not waste yours and get your hopes up. So they're gonna be telling you like, yeah, I understand why you love this, but I can see the activity. I've spoken with the agent. It's probably gonna sell outside your budget, unfortunately.
Check sales in the area.
It's gonna sell.
Yeah.
Outside your budget, right?
Of course.
Versus like, again, this seems like it's priced not for this bidding war. Let's focus on it, see what happens. In terms of leading up to the offer deadline and can we avoid competition? Or, again, you mentioned like something's priced at 130 and we're talking 220, like for those just waking up and paying attention to real estate from a decade ago, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like, not a decade, but for the past 5 years, it's not every house sells 100 grand over asking, but like it's not uncommon to have that happen, as wonky as it seems. So hence escalation clauses to protect you.
Sure.
Benefit for both sides. It's good for the industry.
Great tool. Tool.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Cool. I think we covered a lot. We missed anything?
Yeah.
Good, right?
We're good. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Peter Riccardi with us as always. Jason Mancuso here. Check us out on our YouTube channel. Check us out at anthonybuterateam.com. Thanks for tuning in to the Rochester Real Estate Show.
Awesome.